we're going to build a duplex here. Joey said this pompously. A duplex. That's right. I demolished it, so I'm out of money now. And you'll have to pay for the construction costs. His mother-in-law nodded in satisfaction. I was just stunned by Joey's statement, but once I sorted out my thoughts, I burst out laughing.
Ahahaha.
What's with you, suddenly laughing? What's so funny? Both the mother-in-law and Joey seemed a bit panicked by my laughter. Maybe they thought I would cry and be upset. They seemed confused by my reaction not being what they expected. After I finished laughing, I opened my mouth. Haven't you heard? And the moment they heard my statement, the mother-in-law and Joey, contrary to my laughing, showed faces of despair. My name is Cindy Manning. I grew up in the countryside, sandwiched between an older brother and a younger brother, with a father who was a regular office worker and a mother who was a homemaker. Because of our rural home, I spent my childhood running around the fields and hills with my brothers. And I guess I developed a bit of a tomboy personality. Cindy is a bit too spirited. I wonder if anyone will marry her. After fights that led to injuries or falling from trees and breaking bones. My mother worried about me like that because I was such a tomboy. Because of this, even as an adult, I struggled to find a good match. And at times I thought I might end up alone forever. However, seeing this, my boss at work proposed a match for me. That's when I met my husband, Joey. Joey was living with his single mother. His mature way of thinking and the way he cared for his mother made me believe that marrying him would make me happy. So, I accepted Joey's proposal and we got married. After getting married, we planned to live together, but due to unavoidable circumstances, we ended up living separately. At the time, Joey was living in a public housing complex. It was far too small for me to move into. Although we wanted to move into a bigger house, it was hard to find available rentals in the countryside. Reluctantly, the mother-in-law ended up living alone in the public housing. And Joey and I finally started our married life in a nearby 3-room rental apartment. We need to buy a house soon and live together with my mom. That's true. It's okay, for now, but it will be tough for your mother to live alone. I knew Joey cared deeply for his mother. And I genuinely wanted to care for her as well. However, we couldn't immediately resolve the living situation. And 6 months into our marriage, I discovered I was pregnant. My parents, brothers, and mother-in-law were all very happy, eagerly anticipating the baby's arrival. 10 months later, a healthy baby girl was born. We named her Nicole. I went back to my parents' house for about a month and then returned home. And so, the 3 of us started living together. That's when it began. The mother-in-law started giving me subtle harassment. Mostly, it was sarcastic comments. If we could live with 3 people, it would have been better if I had been included from the start. Joey had talked to me about deciding on the house, but in a sarcastic and mean way. She began saying things like that. I just gave a wry smile. But her troublesome actions weren't just limited to sarcastic comments. Ever since I returned from my parents' house, the mother-in-law would come over every day and stay from morning till evening. She probably wanted to see Nicole. But because of that, I couldn't escape her sarcastic comments. As I was soothing Nicole, she would say to my month-old daughter, "It would have been better if you were a boy. You'll need to give me a son soon." Finally, I told her. A second child. Nicole was just born. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to Nicole, right? Even though she said that, it was clear her words were meant for me. Dealing with inexperienced parenting, housework, and lack of sleep. It was honestly exhausting to deal with her every day. This continued every day, and frankly, I was feeling down, so I finally decided to talk to Joey. Joey, about your mom. What's up with my mom? Joey knew that his mother came to our house every day. However, he probably couldn't imagine that I found it bothersome. I hesitated about whether to speak up, but believing that Joey, who cherished his mother, would consider my feelings, I opened my mouth. It's bothersome having her come over every day. Bothersome. My mom is lonely and needs someone to talk to. That might be true, but Nicole and I have our timings. It's troubling if it's every day. I couldn't bring myself to talk about the sarcastic comments. I didn't want to paint his mother as the villain. However, I was hoping Joey would be sympathetic to my feelings, but from his expression, it seemed my wish had not been granted. You showed Nicole to your own parents at your home, right? Are you saying I should tell my mom not to come? As expected, Joey spoke in an angry tone, blaming me. My stay at home was for maternity leave. Your mom helped me out. But your mom makes me prepare lunch for her. What's wrong with preparing food? That's not a big deal. Joey seemed to think it was no big deal that I was only a month postpartum and frequently up at night. I was physically and mentally exhausted, and I needed support from Joey, my husband. But his response was disappointing. But that wasn't all. Joey had told his mother what I had confided in him. The next day, when she came over, she immediately said to me, "So, you told Joey to tell me not to come?" I didn't say not to come. I just said that every day is difficult. Really? Who do you think is supporting this lifestyle thanks to whose son? After that, the mother-in-law became even more aggressive toward me. Despite having been through childbirth herself, did she not understand how hard it was for me? I thought about fleeing to my parents' home at that time. But I didn't even have the mental space to consider that. Enduring the daily hardships and constant snide remarks from my mother-in-law. However, my naturally bright and tomboyish nature kept me from breaking. After a while postpartum, as I stabilized mentally, I started to tune out the mother-in-law's snide comments. Once I clearly recognized that I disliked her, I got better at handling her. Isn't there lunch today? Even when the mother-in-law asked this upon visiting, I started to clearly state, there are leftovers from the baby food if you want. If not, feel free to go home and eat. She seemed even more displeased by this. When Nicole turned 3, I resumed work. Having left my job for marriage, I hadn't planned to work for a while. But Joey's salary wasn't increasing, and I was forced to economize. Thinking I might not be able to provide Nicole with a good education, I wanted to earn whatever I could. Despite facing the trials of nursery school, such as colds and infections, I managed on my own to juggle work, household, and childcare. Consequently, my interactions with the mother-in-law naturally decreased. Though physically demanding, I was surprised how much better I felt not having to hear her snide remarks. The mental impact was more significant than I thought. However, Joey apparently didn't find this amusing. Is there really a need to work to the extent of neglecting my mom? Joey repeatedly told me he wanted me to quit my job. But I disliked both being forced to economize and having my spirit worn down by dealing with his mother. I conveyed that I had a valid reason to work and adamantly refused to quit. One day, Joey resorted to a drastic measure against me. He stole my bank book. No matter how much you work, I will manage it. Since you can't use it freely anyway. If you have time to work, spend it taking care of my mom. I was astounded. One wouldn't usually go to such extremes, even if he didn't want to leave his mother alone. Despite my protests, the bank book did not return. Nevertheless, I continued to work and figured out how to keep my earnings from being taken. If I changed my salary account, it would surely be discovered and seized again. So, I explained the situation to my company, and they agreed to pay part of my salary in cash. Joey, satisfied with managing the account where my salary was deposited, wouldn't suspect that I was receiving part of it separately. The cash I received was saved for Nicole's future, and I kept the existence of this money a secret. Thanks to this, by the time Nicole graduated high school, I had managed to save a significant amount of money. That's how our family lived. Joey's salary didn't increase much, and despite our savings, money was tight. The plan to buy a house and live with the mother-in-law hadn't yet materialized, which, in retrospect, seemed for the best. With Nicole now heading to university, and her tuition and living expenses looming, cohabitation seemed even more distant, which was a relief. However, one day, something shocking happened. My mother passed away, and a few months later, my father followed due to different illnesses. They had a good relationship. I thought they had gone to heaven together. But the shock and sense of loss I experienced were substantial. It's hard on us, left behind when both of them go together like this. It seemed my brother and younger brother felt the same way. My younger brother and I shared our thoughts about our parents. I bet Dad is getting scolded by Mom up there. Coming so early. Indeed. I can imagine that. Right. But anyway, we need to do something about the house. We can't just leave it like this. As my brother said, the beloved family home where my parents had lived together was now empty. Both my brothers were married and had their own homes. And the family home was also physically deteriorating. That's right. If we leave it, it will affect the neighborhood's safety. And it's a nuisance to the neighbors. Though we discussed it with my brothers during the funeral arrangements, there wasn't much time to talk thoroughly. For the time being, since I lived the closest, we agreed that I would handle the cleanup. And we would discuss what to do with the house after that. However, things did not go as planned. When I finally went back to the family home after the funeral had settled down, it was gone. What happened? I hurriedly contacted my brothers. Both were speechless upon hearing from me that the house was gone. And from their reactions, it seemed unlikely that they had arranged for its demolition. As I stood there dumbfounded at the sight of the now missing house, I heard footsteps. Cindy. You're here. There was Joey. Oh, did you come to help? And there was the mother-in-law. Why were these two here? I slowly shifted my gaze to the two of them. Help? What do you mean? Isn't it obvious? We're cleaning up. Cleaning up? Joey, did you demolish my house?
Yeah.
We're going to build a duplex here. Joey said arrogantly. A duplex. That's right. I demolished it, so I'm out of money now. And you'll have to pay for the construction costs. How about asking your brothers to chip in too? I demolished the house for you. Dot. The mother-in-law nodded in satisfaction. I was just stunned by Joey's statement. His behavior was so far out of the ordinary that I couldn't follow. But as I slowly organized my thoughts, I couldn't help but burst out laughing.
Ahahaha.
What's going on? Why are you suddenly laughing? What's so funny? Both the mother-in-law and Joey seemed a bit panicked by my laughter. Maybe they thought I would cry and be upset. It seems they were confused by my reaction not being what they expected. After I finished laughing, I opened my mouth. Haven't you heard? Weren't you there during the conversation with my brothers? Huh? Oh, I was listening. That's why we went ahead and demolished it. It would have been a waste to leave it as an empty house. The house is run down, but the land is large. The mother-in-law and Joey finally responded to my question. But I was convinced that they hadn't really listened to the conversation. At the funeral, I had discussed what to do with the family home with my siblings. Joey and the mother-in-law were next to me at the funeral. But they must have only heard what suited them and decided on this drastic action. Imagining them whispering together, I couldn't stop laughing. "You're so silly. Actually, no more houses can be built here. There's no way you can build a duplex." "What? What do you mean?" Startled by my bombshell, Joey became flustered. "I mean exactly that. Is that some kind of joke? There was a house here before, wasn't there?" The mother-in-law was also in a panic. I just smiled at the two of them. "Yes, there was a house before. But the building codes have been revised. And now you can't build here. This family home was a non-reconstructible property." At my words, Joey and the mother-in-law turned pale. "What do you mean by non-reconstructible? So, was demolishing it a waste?" It seemed they finally grasped the situation. Joey asked, flustered, and I responded with a smile. "It wasn't a waste. I thought it would have to be demolished someday. Thanks for doing it." Although I was upset that the family home was demolished without my consent, I delivered those words and a smile full of sarcasm to them. Sooner or later, it had to be done. I wasn't ready yet, but I convinced myself it was for the best. However, contrary to my smile, the mother-in-law and Joey started to freak out. "You never said that. Is this fraud? How can you keep such an important thing a secret?" Their arguments were utterly unreasonable. But the more they raged, the funnier I found it. They had no right to complain to me since they had demolished it on their own. But they didn't seem to realize that. After all the trouble of demolishing it, was it a waste of money? Yes. You and your brothers should pay for the demolition costs. It cost $60,000. I was shocked by the amount. $60,000. That can't be right. I knew you would oppose it if I told you. So, I found a contractor who would demolish it without needing a signature. Joey blurted out, and I was dumbfounded. A legitimate demolition contractor would have required the signature of the heirs, including myself, my brothers. However, thinking we would oppose it, it seemed he had hired some shady operators who didn't need such formalities. Probably some kind of criminal organization. Thus, the cost of demolition was $60,000. Significantly more than the typical $30,000 for our family home. I don't know why he was so arrogant, but even after explaining the situation, Joey continued acting as if he had done nothing wrong. "Oh, what a waste of money. What? I'm not paying for the demolition. Good job arranging it." I reiterated to Joey and the mother-in-law that I had no intention of paying for the demolition. "What will we do, Joey?" "There goes the duplex." The mother-in-law was confused and blamed Joey, but blaming him wouldn't change anything. I left the two of them behind and walked away. Now that the family home was gone, there was no need for me to be there. I went home and calmly contacted my brothers. It was Joey and his mother's doing. "I'm really sorry." After apologizing, I explained about the use of the shady contractors and the $60,000 cost. Both my brothers were appalled by Joey and the mother-in-law's actions, but they said, "Well, at least we don't have to worry about it anymore." Guess we got lucky in a way. The loss of the family home in such a manner would naturally be shocking. However, their kindness in making sure I didn't feel responsible was a relief. That's why I couldn't let Joey and his mother off without giving them a shock greater than what we experienced. After talking with my siblings for a while, Joey and his mother returned to our house together. "Cindy, let's talk." Joey approached me formally. Though I was not enthusiastic, I thought he might apologize, so I reluctantly agreed to the discussion. As we sat around the table, Joey began to speak. "Actually, my mom needs to move out of the public housing in 3 months." "What?" "I intended for us to live in the duplex, but since you ruined that plan, I think we'll live here." I was speechless. Apparently, the mother-in-law had already processed her move out from the public housing. It was absurdly premature to arrange such a thing even before the demolition was complete. "Nicole has moved out, so I can live here, can't I? After all, it's your fault, so you can't refuse, can you?" The mother-in-law was fully prepared to move in. Indeed, with Nicole starting university and living alone, our household had decreased from 3 to 2. However, I had no intention of living with the mother-in-law. And it was baffling why it was supposedly my fault. "Is that so? Then please do. I'll be moving out." I couldn't bring myself to say anything more to them and just left it at that. The mother-in-law heard this and smirked as if she had won. Meanwhile, Joey stood there with his mouth agape. Wait, don't move out. We can live with 3 people. Just think of it as swapping Nicole for mom." It seemed like he didn't want me to leave. "What are you talking about?" "No way." I firmly rejected the idea. I had respected Joey's desire to take care of his mother and had made many sacrifices. But I was done being the one to suffer. Living with the mother-in-law would inevitably lead to being treated like a servant or slave. Just like before. The discussion went nowhere. As the date of the mother-in-law's move-out approached, nothing was settled. Assuming Joey had arranged another place for her, I was shocked when one day the mother-in-law showed up at our door with her belongings. "I'll be staying here." She smirked as she entered. Joey glanced at me briefly then looked away. People who would demolish a house without permission wouldn't hesitate to move in without it either. I had anticipated this. Still hoping Joey would prove trustworthy, I deliberately avoided asking or accusing him about arrangements for his mother. But in the end, Joey prioritized his mother's feelings over mine. Having had enough, I silently went to the bedroom, packed a large bag, and said, "Then, I will be leaving." Joey immediately reacted and stood up. "Thank you for everything." I took my prepared luggage and headed for the door. "Oh, you're leaving? Where to?" "I'd let you stay. But if you want to leave, that's fine." The mother-in-law laughed scornfully. Joey, turning pale, frantically said, "Wait, calm down." "Why don't you calm down?" "I trusted you, Joey. But you ignored my feelings. I'm out of patience. I refuse to live with a stranger." Hearing my words, Joey might have realized his foolishness. He fell to his knees, speechless. I left him behind and exited the house. I headed straight for Nicole's place, where she lived alone. I had explained the situation to her beforehand, and she had told me, "If anything happens, you can come to my place." It was regrettable to impose on my daughter, but it was necessary. "I'm actually relieved you're here, Mom." Nicole appreciated my arrival. Whether her words were mere politeness or not, I was truly glad. Because commuting to work from Nicole's was difficult, I arranged to work remotely and took over the household duties. Nicole could then focus on her studies and part-time job. She often went out with friends and seemed to enjoy her university life. Meanwhile, Joey kept contacting me, mostly begging me to come back. "I've realized how important you are now that you're gone. I was taking care of my mom for your sake, because you always said you admired people who care for their family. If you give up on me, all my efforts would be for nothing. Perhaps this was what they call a Romeo email. By downplaying his wrongdoing and framing everything as excessive love for me, Joey's emails became increasingly repulsive. Each new message from him made me more disgusted. Why don't you just divorce him? There's no benefit to staying with Dad, right? Encouraged by Nicole, I finally decided to divorce. I picked up the divorce papers and, after a long time, went back to the house. Joey was off work, and the mother-in-law was there too. Predicting Joey's presence based on his past behavior, I approached without contacting him first. I didn't want to talk more than necessary. Joey, are you there? When I asked through the intercom, Joey indeed burst out from the house as expected. Joey looked relieved when he saw me and said with a happy smile, "You've come back." No way. I brought the divorce papers. What? Besides, what is that smell? I'm coming in. Though Joey looked devastated by my words, I was more concerned about the stench of rotting garbage that wafted out as soon as the door opened. I pushed past Joey and entered the house. Inside, the living room had transformed into something like a garbage dump. "So, you came back?" She sat nonchalantly on the sofa amidst the trash, watching TV. "There's a lot to do. Why don't you start by taking out the trash?" Upon seeing me, she pointed to a pile of garbage bags. The source of the rotten smell was indeed the accumulated trash, just as she said. "Why don't you dispose of it properly? And even if you told me to throw it out now, I can't because today isn't garbage day," I retorted to the mother-in-law. She laughed heartily and said, "Just leave it outside, and they'll pick it up on garbage day." A response so unreasonable it left me astounded. Glaring at Joey, he instantly shrank back. Leaving was the right decision. If I had stayed, I would have been made a servant. That wouldn't have happened. I'm not planning on coming back. I thrust the divorce papers at him once again. Joey started to tremble at the sight of them. But, the family home had to be demolished eventually, right? Sure, it needed to be demolished at some point. But being demolished without my consent is a different story, isn't it? And I refuse to be enslaved. But, both Mom and I are not good at housekeeping. I was appalled. They were fully planning to use me. Why don't you hire a maid? You should have the money for that, right? After taking my salary and forcing me to economize, I said angrily. Joey replied, "There's no way I have that money. It was used for the demolition. I can't believe you spent it all on the demolition. What's going on?" Joey started to say something but then swallowed his words. I was sure he was hiding something. As we talked, the mother-in-law, who had been interjecting up till then, fell silent. However, a sly smile lingered on her face. Then it clicked. "Don't tell me, you've been giving it to your mother?" Joey looked guilty at that remark. The mother-in-law, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, opened her mouth. "Well, I need my allowance, don't I?" "How much?" "What? How much have you been giving her each month?" At my shouting, Joey cowered. Then he muttered, "I don't know exactly. Mom handles the salary, and I just get my allowance from her." I felt dizzy. Joey's salary hadn't been increasing, or so I thought. But any increase went directly to the mother-in-law. It must have seemed normal to Joey to take my salary since that's what was done to him by his mother. No doubt, he felt no guilt or doubt about it. That's ridiculous. Mother-in-law, didn't you think it was terrible to do such a thing to your own son? I accused the mother-in-law in anger. She responded, visibly irritated. Better than it going to a daughter-in-law, right? I'm his mother, after all. Being a mother doesn't give you the right to do whatever you want. Your constant interference is why our marriage fell apart, isn't it? Are you blaming me? I did it for Joey's sake. The mother-in-law shouted, getting worked up. Let's calm down. But his words were too feeble to be heard by the mother-in-law. I should have never let him marry someone like you. In her frenzy, the mother-in-law threw a cushion at me. But as she did, she lost her balance on the scattered trash, slipped, and screamed.
Ah.
Followed by a loud thud. She fell dramatically and seemed to have struck her arm against the table. Ouch. Mom. I watched with a smirk, thinking they should keep their family drama to themselves. Make sure you file those divorce papers. Wait. Now's not the time for that. You're saying this while I'm in pain? As I said that, the two of them began shouting again, as if they had gone mad. There's nothing more important to me right now than divorcing Joey. But I firmly reiterated my stance. Their complaints and insults flew, but I had no time to waste listening. I left them shouting and walked away from the house. That night, Joey called me. Mom broke her arm. It's inconvenient for her, so please come back home. Then he started to sob. Joey turned out this way because his mother always coddled him. Before we married, I thought Joey cared deeply for his mother. But he was just a mama's boy who couldn't detach from her. I don't care. Please, I really was wrong. I'll apologize. What's the point of your apology? Restore the family home. Recover all the money you gave to your mother, and then maybe I'll listen. I said this, cutting off Joey's pained voice. Now, Joey is living in that garbage-filled house, caring for his mother. Her fracture didn't heal well, leaving her with numbness in her arm. Of course, living on ready-made meals and instant noodles had probably weakened her bones too. The money Joey's mother had been hoarding was spent on a housekeeper when she lived alone, as well as on eating out and other living expenses. Looking back, she always dressed quite lavishly. It's infuriating to know that some of the money I earned also went to her wasteful spending. Now, there likely isn't much money left with Joey and his mother. You're all I can rely on. Please help me. Joey begging for help was proof enough of how tough their impoverished life with his mother must be. Of course, I have no intention of helping. Joey was adamant about not divorcing until the end, but my brothers helped me. We got a lawyer involved, and in the divorce settlement, it was agreed that the salary I had been receiving in cash would remain mine. Think about how terribly you've treated your wife. Joey reportedly cried when the lawyer said that. And your mother needs to let go, Joey. He's an adult now. The lawyer also reprimanded his mother, who reacted furiously and yelled at him. That mother and son will probably never change. The lawyer told me this, laughing. It seems Joey and his mother are living contentedly in that garbage-filled house, managing her lingering symptoms together. I repeatedly advised Joey not to be swayed by his mother. However, ignoring my advice led him to this self-made predicament. I consider it just desserts. Afterward, I moved out of Nicole's house and started living alone. A room next to hers became available. Living next door allows me to support her when needed while maintaining privacy. Even if it's family, it's important to maintain a proper distance when children grow up. Living alone turned out to be more peaceful and comfortable than I expected. The money I earn is now entirely mine. Nicole's tuition still requires funds, but the savings I've accumulated should cover it. Being single might have its challenges, but there's no one left to hold me back. I'm determined to confidently move forward on my own.